Om. 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 Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gratitam Purana Muninam Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Vridavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvam Anusandhatami Bhagavad Gita Bhavatveshini Namostute Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pulla Ravindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajwalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraika Panaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Geetamrutatuhe Namaha Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyaha Mokshayishyami Ma Shuchaha. So I hope everyone had a wonderful Krishna Janmashtami. So it's wonderful to do the Bhagavad Gita as a dedication to Lord Krishna. And so today we are doing the Bhagavad Gita chapter 3. We are already moving on to practically the third topic in this, in Bhagavad Gita itself in chapter 3. As we have said always, the chapter 3 is about the art of action. Really, how can we enjoy this path of action in which we are in? And how can we use this as the path towards a higher living or an evolved living or liberation, as we might say it. So this is what the path of action really teaches us. So for today in the reflection action, I have some reflective questions. And so the shlokas themselves, they start off with action and renunciation. So just a very simple things. Are action and renunciation, are they to be practiced together, or are they to be practiced one after the other? What are your thoughts? So action is karma yoga, renunciation is jnana yoga.
One after the other.
One after the other, exactly. Yeah. It is one after the other. It is not practiced together. And while Shakracharya ji was writing his bhashya for Bhagavad Gita, at that time there were many commentators who had written commentaries for Bhagavad Gita. And some of them actually would say that no, the path of action and the path of renunciation have to be practiced together. And so Bhagavan Shankaracharya ji came on the scene to talk about how they are not jnana karma samuchaya meaning together, but they are actually one after the other. So is it possible to prescribe a single spiritual path for all people?
No.
Not really, right? Any ideas why?
It depends on their development. You know, each person is developing in a different way or different stages. Mm-hmm. So according to the stages only, you have to choose your spiritual pathway.
Yes. So this is we touched upon it very briefly about the Prakriti, right? The nature. Everybody's nature is different. And so there is no single path. And this is where our Hinduism or Sanatana Dharma is so beautiful, because it offers many different paths on how people can evolve. And there is no one single path for all people. Correct. And the last one is, who is a mithyachara?
The one who forcibly tries to meditate, control the senses and meditate.
Right. So this is a very powerful term, even though the word hypocrite sounds like so much of a negativity associated with it, but it sort of brings us immediately into thinking about, what am I doing? Am I doing the right thing, or am I doing it with full attention on anything? And in this case, mithyachara is to indicate a person who is trying to sort of run away from their own duties and trying to meditate, but sitting down has all kinds of thoughts. And even though the person is not physically acting, but then the very fact that we have a thought where the thought is a prelude to an action, we find that those thoughts can also disturb the mind. So just sitting down and trying to show off that I'm meditating is not a good thing, but really working towards calming the mind with the right information is the word. So there's something to think about here. So we have discussed so far from up to about shloka number 8. We just barely started 9. In fact, shloka number 8 has a few more points that I wanted to bring about. But in shloka number 6 is really the second topic of this third chapter, where we found that in the first topic of the first chapter, there was this Arjuna and Krishna's dialogue on Arjuna trying to bring up to Krishna his confusion about why is Krishna trying to asking him to fight. But Lord Krishna really didn't ask him to fight. He gave him the knowledge of the two paths. But from shloka 6, we see that Arjuna is really being educated in the path of action. And this path of action for all of us is really the way, because it gives us a field of exploration in and through every responsibilities that we are involved with in work, whether it's home, family situation. The path of action gives us the ability to give up our weaknesses and to attain the clarity of mind, the purity of which leads to the purity of our actions. So everything, the responsibilities that I do, when I do it with a pure mind, then what happens is it allows me to really understand my true self, which is getting us into the path of Jnana Yoga. So in order to get to that, we have to develop a purity of mind, which will help me to focus upon the Shastras, to focus upon our listening skills. So this is really the prerequisite to meditation, to understand this knowledge of the self. So Krishna is really telling Arjuna, yes, I've shown you both the paths, but I really want you to take up the path of action, because you are a Kshatriya and that is your gunas. So you have to be able to conquer your own rajasic gunas through the karma yoga. And the examples that we talked about last time too is, it is not possible to go to the second half of our life without crossing the first half. For example, if I have to do a PhD, I have to do the prerequisites. I cannot jump into a PhD. If I want to become, a CEO of a company, I have to first develop the skills to be able to show it. So in and through, we see that practically. And here, that is what he was trying to show. So this is the one where the mithyachara word was coming up, where we see that Krishna is really trying to say that you cannot run away to this naishkarmya, Naishkarmya is this actionlessness path, actionlessness, or the path of yoga, path of Jnana Yoga. So in order to do that, I cannot do this by restricting the organs. So we discussed that we are so full of desires, and that desires manifests itself in my meditative thing, most important. But here we are talking about meditation. However, this is kind of symbolic of anything and everything we do. Whenever I'm doing any action, if I'm looking at always as what is in it for me, then to that extent, my mind becomes very distracted, and it is unable to focus on the karma at hand. So this is why we talked about how it is important to have the pure mind itself. So in this context, last time I wanted to show this story here. Many of you may have already read the story or heard about it, but it is really a story about how if I don't have the purity of mind, then anything and everything I see outside, I will try to label them or judge them very differently. So here, this is a story of two monks. As they were walking on a beach, suddenly they hear this cry of a woman who was crying out, saying, "Save me, save me." And these two monks, there's one of them is the younger one. You can see the one is the younger one, and the other one was the older monk. And both of them, of course, they have taken these vows of celibacy and austerity and everything. So the minute they heard the voice of this young woman who was asking, "Save me, save me," the older monk immediately jumped into the river and saved the young girl, and carried her on his back and brought her safely to the shore. The younger one really didn't do anything; he just stayed behind. So after the monk dropped the young lady on the beach, then both the monks started walking further along. And suddenly the old monk sensed that the younger monk was a little disturbed in his mind. And he turned to him and he said, "So what is in your mind, son?" Not son here. What is your mind, O monk? Tell me. So the younger monk did not know how to bring up this topic. But then he said, how did you allow yourself to touch a young woman? Aren't we sworn into this celibacy and everything? So the older monk looked at him and said, I dropped the girl long time ago, but you are still carrying it in your mind. So this is again this example for a mithyachara. Mithyachara, that is, even though I have understood what I'm supposed to be doing, but yet my mind is not completely pure and to accept the world. So for such a situation is why we are given this world to exhaust our own vasanas, so to speak, our own desires. And the only way one can exhaust our desires is in two ways. One of them is by recognizing that the desires we have in our mind is very temporary, is what we call mithya, or is not really there. But I've placed a lot of importance to it. So once I recognize it's a mithya, then the desire itself has no value. The second way for us to really having a control on the desires is to do it to basically indulge in the desire, but do it with the attitude of a karma yogi, indicating that, I do this without allowing myself to get attached further on to anything more, but to be able to just enjoy it at that moment and then just leave it and then continue on. So I wanted to just bring the story of the monk to explain this aspect of mithyachara. Mithyachara is not just in meditation, but it is also in our conduct. So now then we discussed the shloka number 7 last time, where it was a prescription now for somebody who's a seeker, who is now given a prescription on how to enjoy this path of action. Because this was a question that Meena had asked. So how do I really enjoy this path of action? So the 3 things that we discussed last time here is, in order to enjoy this path of action, which is karma yoga, number 1 is the ability to control my sense organs and focus my mind towards a higher goal. So our sense organs, we have been given this 5 sense organs, which the nature of it, the responsibility of it, is really to look outside and to gather the impressions and bring it back to the mind. And then the mind absorbs whatever impression is it, impressions that it has received, and then it acts on those impressions through the organs of action, which is the karmendriyas. So, for example, if I am, I come across something really, something really tasty or something to eat, and so the mind gets those impressions through the 5 sense organs, whether it's the eyes, ears, etc. And then the mouth starts to water, and then you kind of go towards it, right? Now, the same mind here, which is what it's saying, yahatu indriyani manasa niyamya rabhrate karma indriyahi karma yogam asakta savishishyate. So, if the mind always has a higher goal, then what happens is it is in control of the sense organs. So indriyani manasa. So the mind is able to control the sense organs only when the mind is focused on the higher goal. Asaktaha. So it is completely detached from the indriyas, and it is always this one. When that happens, then the karma yoga, whatever action I'm doing, that leads to an excellent result. So that's what was discussed in Shloka 7. That is, asaktaha savishishyate, just by being dispassionate, by mastering the senses, and by using this attitude of karma yoga. When somebody does that, then the vasanas are not created. As I said, when the sense organs are going out to get these impressions, those impressions do not create a new vasana, because the mind is already focused on a higher goal, focused on something else that the mind wants to do. Let's take this even as a simple example of losing weight or whatever. If the mind is focused on a goal that this food, for example, is going to create a lot of problems, physical health problems, if the mind is already convinced about this, then obviously it won't gravitate towards the sweets. Now, if we can take this at a higher level where the mind is always in line with the thinking of the intellect, the mind is always focused on praying to the Lord, or the mind is always focused on having the thoughts of, say, Krishna in our mind. So then the mind is never going to get distracted. So asaktaha. So just by detachment of this, when the person performs any actions, automatically the ego is not there to get satisfied, because the mind is getting trained to always look at a higher purpose. So by detachment, such a person excels. So when Meena asked this one question as to what are the different ways I can really learn from this path of action? So in this shloka, we have this example of always focusing our mind. Whenever my mind is not working in the field of action, where my ego is not coming into play, and the mind is focused on doing anything and everything, to having that Lord in mind, thinking that everything, the entire world is permeated by the only that Ishvara. And when I have that kind of a bhava, then my actions are very pure. So that is the asaktaha savishishyate, an example which you see from this, which in some sense it came in previous chapter also. But here the idea is more from how to disengage from this world and focusing on a higher goal here. So another thing we discussed last time, I think the question came is, can we think about an example of selfless actions, since we are talking about shloka number 7? And in our literature, there are many examples of selfless people. We always bring examples of Mahatma Gandhi, for example. And we also see in our own homes about how our grandmothers, our parents, they do everything not for themselves. Their mind is always focused on what is good for the family. In that sense, it's a selfless act. So many, but I thought for the purpose of today's lecture, I wanted to focus on one thing that I was very touched when this is an incident from last year. I don't know how many of you read this beautiful article on Antonio Gwen from Buffalo. Here was this kid, literally a young kid. I think he's still a high school kid. He actually, this is during the George Floyd incident time. He marched for about 18, he's only 18 years old. He marched for hours in downtown Buffalo to protest the killing of George Floyd. And then, he goes home, and after that, something strikes him. And what he did was he went back, and by himself, he decided that he was going to clean the streets of Buffalo. So he spent the night just by himself, sweeping the streets. And he didn't, nobody told him that he had to do it, but he did it. And it was just a selfless act on his part. I mean, he was affected by this whole incident, and he did this. So there are many such incidents that we come across in our life. But what happens is we get so busy and we don't pay attention to it. But when Bhagavad Gita talks about some of these principles, then we are able to connect both of them and recognize that these acts of selflessness is what really purifies our mind. And when the purity of mind is there, then automatically our ability to focus on our higher self is also there. So I just thought I'll bring this one example of a selfless act. So Lord Krishna's advice then is to Arjuna to say that, Arjuna, you know what? It is in our DNA, it is in our DNA to do karma. So there's just no way you can just go off to the Himalayas. And, the shloka is nahi kaschit kshanamapi jatu tishtatya karma krit, which is we are wired to do this, our karma. So why not just use our day-to-day work, day-to-day responsibilities to bring the clarity into this? And it's only through selfless action that we are going to be able to progress. And that is the only thing that's going to lead to purification, and that will lead to knowledge. So this is the conclusion from that topic there. So then the question will then come is, if that is the case, I'm involved with so many different kinds of actions here, whether it's my actions at my work, in the family, and even among these kind of actions, there are so many different type of actions. So Arjuna's question then probably was, what kind of karma should I really do here? And Lord Krishna probably could have just said, okay, buddy, why don't you just pick up your bow and start fighting here? That is what you should be doing. But, Lord Krishna, the patient teacher that he is really giving us some more things to think about. And through the discussion, we see the advice that comes to us which can help us shape our lives also. So he says this shloka, which is Niyatam kuru karmatvam karma jyayo hya karmanaha sharira yatra pichate na prasiddhyeda karmanaha. So this is where we were last time. The whole idea is Bhagavan says Niyatam kuru karmatvam. Tvam, which is you do this karma. What karma is that? It is that karma which is sort of, which is, we call this word enjoined, indicating that which is you are supposed to be doing. And we might say, then what is it that I'm supposed to be doing? If I look at, because the question always comes is, and this is especially the case with mothers, for example, when mothers always have this question, I do my work, I have a job, but I also have a family. And where do I really spend the time? What is really my absolute duty, for example? And so that is one question that comes up so many times. Another question is, even at my work, what exactly is my responsibility? What is my duty? So that this is something that comes. Then what about my religion? Or what about my, the things that I have to do at home in order to bring about peace and everything? I'm using both ways. One is religion-wise, one is something else to bring the balance in the house. So what is my duty at that point? So we see we have all these questions in our mind. And so Lord Krishna really tells us at the end of the day, the way to spend the time is on what you are meant to be doing. Look within yourself. Each one of us have our own DNA. We said DNA is one, or our gunas and our motivation, for example. So two things. One is, what is really my personality? And we will come into those gunas again. And the second thing is, what is my true motivation? Where does that lie? So these two things, if I use, that will help us define what is really my particular karma. The second thing here, the second, third, and the fourth line, basically, Lord Krishna is telling Arjuna that, look at your own self. There is, even for your own body, in order to maintain your body, there are certain things which happen on a regular basis. And your body itself would not have been possible to maintain if one or two of the systems, say, for example, suddenly my lungs, they say, okay, I'm on vacation today, I'm not going to do anything. What would happen? So, my heart says, I'm not going to pump blood today, I need a vacation. So these things cannot really happen, right? So Sharira Yatra, Sharira being the body, even for a Sharira Yatra, these things have to happen continuously. So you see, we have to, so indirectly he's trying to tell Arjuna that, your job is really to do what you're supposed to be doing. There's just no way you can stop doing that, because there's one other aspect where he says that action is superior to inaction, akarmanaha. That is also not, so you have to act. You have to act, but the way you act is you decide that what is really your particular duty, what is your particular responsibility, and that responsibility is determined by things, how the environment influences your own motivation, And with your guna, how is that possible? So last time we went through this, it's amazing. In order for us to even decide what I should be doing, the rishis came up with this classification. It's not something that was which was decided later on in some Puranas or anything, but these things were already decided by the rishis, where the work for each one of us is already given. And what we are told is things that need to be done is the nitya karmas. We call this daily duties, which is really the huge thing of everything that we do. And then along with that, there are some things called naimittika karmas. So nitya karmas, simple things is making sure that I get my 8 hours of sleep. I do my some amount of yoga or something like that, my pranayama, and then a certain amount of shastra reading to take care of it. Then my community help, not community help will come in. Or it can be community help in the sense of taking care of my family, for example, taking care of people who are dependent on me, all these things. And then when I'm at work, to fulfill the responsibilities of my job description, so to say, whatever my job description is. So this is why it's very important to be very clear on job descriptions. So what is my job description as a worker at work? What is my job description in my family? And to take that seriously and to do it. And that is the nitya karmas. Then in addition to that, the naimittika karmas are things which comes as special occasions. It could be things like, for example, if I have to attend the wedding of my friend, or if I have to take care of somebody in the hospital, for example, or for example, if I have to fulfill the duties of being in the army, for example, all these things, they come and go. They're not there all the time. And that is why they're special occasions. And then there are some small amount of desires which can be entertained, which is again part of my own prarabdha, for example, that can be done. But as a human being, we're asked to take the help of our intellect to decide on what exactly are those desires that I need to fulfill and what is it that I should be careful about. And that gets to the next level of nishiddha karmas. Obviously, we all know what addictions can do, and whether it's addictions or whether certain things, even from a mental level and intellectual level, what we should and we should not do. And then prashita karmas is if I did do something wrong, to be able to recognize that and to do certain karmas to nullify that. But nullifying in the sense, whatever the effect of the karma is, that I cannot avoid it, but it will help me to have a better handle on the effect itself. So that is prayachita karmas. So this is, we talked about. And then Sharira Yatra, for the maintenance of the body, as we said, also we have to do the regular things that is needed. So Shari, the pilgrimage of this body, that is what Yatra. Yatra means pilgrimage. It is not possible if somebody is not, if one person is just sitting down and doing nothing. We know that leads to a lot of physical ailments. So in this case also, we have to make sure that the functioning of the physical body is continuously carried out. Otherwise, it leads to, weight gains and things like that. So in all this, Lord Krishna is showing about how karma, that action is very, very important. And action, of course, as we said, is superior to inaction. Yeah, karma jayo hi karmanaha, because again, with inaction, nothing. By not doing anything, we're not going to really. It's not going to open any doors. So even to open new doors for opportunities in everything, we have to do some actions. So obligatory duties are necessary, and these obligatory duties will help us progress and evolve. So work we must, but that is the final answer for this shloka here. So Arjuna probably listened to this, where Krishna said that, okay, you have to work. And I'm sure the question would have come to him is, you're telling me that, I have to work, but Krishna, I think there is a problem here. If I keep on working, and we know this too, right? When we all came to this country, we all thought that we came here to fulfill our vasana. From that karmas of wanting to come here, we find that there is so much more. We get into some other aspects of, our mind gets distracted into, how much more can we do? And we keep on working more and more and more. And there comes a point where I don't know when to quit. So Arjuna must have thought about it the same way. He would have thought, you're telling me to work, and here I am. I might do what you're saying, which is I might get into this war, and I might start doing my duty of doing as a Kshatriya. But then, what if I win the war? If I win the war, I'm going to, feel so good about myself, and I might think about what next and next. So this karma that I'm starting off, won't it become a bondage for me? Simple example we know from our lives too is, if I never tasted coffee, and the first time I took coffee and I happen to like it, then what happens? Slowly and slowly, I start developing more like for it. And then, lo and behold, soon I'm addicted to coffee. So there is a channel which is created in my mind where that coffee becomes a bondage for me, right? It has become a habit. So how can I prevent any karmas from becoming a habit for me? And so this is what is being addressed in the next shloka here. So we'll chant the shloka. It's a very, very, I want to say, very meaningful shloka. And this shloka is the prelude for really how we are looking at karmas, not from an individual level, because so far we have discussed about the level at Arjuna's level, right? Where we are looking at ourselves too in that level. But here it is entering into a level of a more macroscopic scale. So we'll see what it is. Yajnarthat karmanonyatra. Yajnarthat karmanonyatra. Lokoyam karma bandhanaha. Lokoyam karma bandhanaha. Tadartam karma kaunteya. Tadartam karma kaunteya. Mukta sangha samachara. Mukta sangha samachara. Yajnarthat karmanonyatra. Lokoyam karma bandhanaha. Tadartam karma kaunteya. Mukta sangha samachara. So the simple meaning here is, the world is bound by actions. How does this whole world function? The world is bound by actions. Now, but Krishna is telling Arjuna, there are some actions where the world, the bondage doesn't happen. What are those actions? What are those actions which does not lead to a bondage? And those actions, Lord Krishna is telling Arjuna, are those actions which are done in the attitude of a sacrifice. The word for sacrifice is yajna. So Lord Krishna is telling Arjuna, any actions you perform, we just finished talking about niyatam karma, niyata karma, which is our own obligatory duties. So here Krishna is saying that all those actions which you're taking, if you perform it with an attitude of yajna, then that leads you forward. Tadartam karma kaunteya, O kaunteya. So do all those actions only in that way. Do it in the form of a sacrifice and mukta sangha samachara. Do it with, which is, perform that action which is free from all sangaha. Sangaha means attachment. Muktaha, mukta sangha, which is free from all attachment. Samachara, sama acharaha. Sama means well, acharaha means that action itself. So perform it really well. Perform that action in that spirit. So as I said, this is really the sort of concluding verse of this section, which include, in 7 and 8 we saw this, and here he concludes ultimately with saying that, do the actions is obligatory, as he said, and in 7 he said, do the actions in such a way that you do it for a higher goal, and in here he's saying, do the same actions as in the spirit of a sacrifice. Only when you do this, then you're not going to be bound to the world, and you can actually extricate yourself. You can pull yourself from the world itself in such a case. So this is the only things which works. So samachara means do it well, and which is, don't do a shoddy job of anything. Don't take any shortcuts. Just do it really well. And in such a case, you'll be free from any of the attachments any of the vasanas. Your vasanas are not going to increase. And that is the idea behind this shloka here. So since the word yajna, yajna arthat karmanaha anyatra, I'm sure you must be thinking, why is the word yajna brought here, right? Because I'm sure many of you have read Amar Chitra Kathas, for example, and you would have seen all these pictures of yajnas and everything, which is what I'm showing here. A very, interesting picture where, we are seeing this fire with the havan, and we have all the priests, adding the ghee and into the havans. And in fact, if you come to Balaji temple, you see the yajna being done so many times. It's wonderful to see the whole process of the yajna, how it is done, the ritual itself. But philosophically, let us try to understand what the word yajna means. The word yajna, is really so beautiful because it really talks about, in the olden days, you had all the people who would come together and bring something or the other for the yajna, whatever they could afford, whatever they could bring. Somebody will bring some rice, somebody will bring some butter, somebody will bring the sticks, and somebody else will bring some flowers. All this is done in a spirit of what you call this as a cooperative endeavor. Everybody is involved. All of them come together to do this yajna. And if you look at the word yajna, just to give you a little bit of Sanskrit grammar here, the word yajna comes from the root, which is called yaj. The word yaj, which means to worship or to sacrifice. And the word yajna is beautiful in the sense it encompasses really a spirit of oneness or Advaita, we say, because the word yajna is yajati iti yajna. That is, the one who is performing the yajna is also called as a yajna. And the altar of worship, that is also called yajna. And the act of performing it is also called as yajna. So the word yajna is really, it encompasses, as I said, the Advaita principle, the aspect of total oneness. Anything and everything when I do with this as act of doing that, there is no difference between me and anybody. And that is why when you hear the word na mama, which is, swaha, na mama, which is said, is trying to say that all this, I'm not the one who's doing it. I'm not the one who's doing it. So the performer, the yajna, everything is shown here by the word yajna. And this yajno vai Vishnuhu, some of you may have heard this terminology. It comes in Shruti, it is mentioned in many of the, in Taittiriya Upanishad, I think, in Vishnu Sahasranamam, it is mentioned in so many different ways. The word Vishnu indicating that Saguna Brahman, it is, I'm doing it for the sake of Vishnu. I'm doing it for the sake of that Paramatma. When I do any of my actions with that attitude that I'm doing it for that Paramatma, it is a yajna. It is a spirit of sacrifice. And when any action is done with that attitude, there is no cause for bondage at all. And how can we do something with that attitude for God? Is when I have that love for God, when I have that love and reverence and respect for that ultimate reality, then that is the altar in which I'm doing everything. And that is what the word Vishnu itself means. So yajnarthat Ishvaraha, it is for that Vishnu that I'm doing everything with that Ishvara Arpitam. And why not? Why not? Why don't we do it for Vishnu, right? Vishnu is none other. For example, if I say that I love money, who can be a greater, greater in terms of money, as in Lakshmi Pati, who is none other than Vishnu, right? And if I'm saying that I do anything for the sake of power, why not I worship that person who is the ultimate power? Okay, Shaktiman. He or she is a Shaktiman. So why not I do it as a dedication to that Shaktiman? So in every possible way, the word Vishnu indicates the highest level of power, wealth, omniscience, everything. So when I do that action for that higher boss, rather than the smaller boss which I'm doing for, then my actions becomes very pure. It becomes with lot of love for that higher goal. So that is the whole idea of doing it in that yajna spirit. So why should I really then not work? Why should I not work in the spirit? Why should I work? Why should I not work? This should have been, why should I not work in the spirit of dedication to that Vishnu then, to that higher boss? Because as I said, there cannot be anyone higher than Vishnu as my own boss, right? Omnipotent, Sarvashaktiman, as I said, all this is there. And So in this regard, there's this beautiful story, which again, you would have heard. I think some of you would have heard about the story of Akbar and Tan Sin, which really exemplifies this shloka about the spirit of doing anything for the higher goal, and a higher goal and spirit of dedication to God. So this is a story about Akbar and his court musician. His court musician's name was Tan Sin. So Tan Sin was a really great musician in Akbar's court, and Akbar loved listening to him all the time. And once, when Tan Sin sang a particular rag, Akbar was transported so much, and he said, Tan Sin, you are the greatest. There cannot be anyone greater than you, right? And Tan Sin, out of all humility, he said, I cannot accept this, O Lord, because you have to. I have learned this from my own guru, who is Haridas Maharaj, who is a great Krishna devotee, and he is the ultimate. He is the best singer in my, in Tan Sin's mind. He said. So Akbar was like, really? Well, I want to listen to him now. Can we have him? Can we have him visit our court? So Tan Sin immediately said, no, he doesn't. He doesn't travel. But what he wanted to say is that no, his guru will stay where he is, and if you want to listen to him, then we have to go to him. So Akbar said, okay, let's do that. And Tan Sin said, you'll have to disguise yourself. And so Akbar agreed to it. So both Akbar and Tan Sin went to the temple where Haridas was staying there. And in the evening, from a little further away, Haridas ji sang a beautiful song, beautiful piece, and Akbar was completely transported into a totally different world. And after that, after listening to him, then later when Tan Sin and Akbar came back to the court, Akbar couldn't resist asking Tan Sin, your guru was so great. He was great. Now I can see why you were praising him. How come you're not able to sing to that level of greatness? So Tan Sin simply said, well, my guru sings for that Lord Krishna, but I sing for you, O Lord. So this really, the story exemplifies, the need for how to dedicate our actions to that higher self. And in doing so, how our actions become even more beautiful. And another story from Ramayana, which you have heard before, but it's about how when Hanumanji was in the kingdom of Sugriva, we have seen how when Sri Rama and Lakshmanji were walking in the forest, they see this monkey who was just lying in the floor, was lying on the ground. He really did not seem very motivated or anything. But when Sri Rama came into the life of Hanumanji, you can see how he became so strong and he was able to exert his potential to his highest. So again, the altar of dedication is the important aspect here. And it was because of Sri Rama, even how all the monkeys were motivated to, fight for Lord Rama there. So yajnartat karmano nyatra loko ayam karma bandhanaha Tadartam karma kaunteya mukta sangha samachara. So the only way we can liberate ourselves from the bondage of karmas is to dedicate, to do any action with Ishvara Arpanam, that is surrender to the Lord, and take anything what we get as a prasada buddhi, which is accepting the results and how way it comes to us. So what are the actions that bind us? So any actions that is done with the spirit of what is in it for me leads to bondage and keeps us bound to the world. Loko ayam karma bandhanaha. And the actions that liberate is the ones which are done with yajnartat karmano anyatra. Yajnartat karmanaha. Anything which is done with the dedication of, in the spirit of sacrifice. So this completes the section, one section. We are going to move to the next section where we see the same attitude done on a much higher scale. We'll see examples from the environment. So there are a lot of environmentally friendly shlokas, which we will see in the next section here, where it deals with, from a cosmic way, how to think, I would say, globally, even though we may be acting locally. So this is the idea behind the next few shlokas. There's 1 minute here, so we will chant the shloka and then we will see it next time. Sahayagnya praja srishtva, Sahayagnya praja srishtva, Purovacha prajapatihi, Purovacha prajapatihi, Anena prasavishyadhvam, Anena prasavishyadhvam, Eshavostvishta kama dukha, Eshavostvishta kama dukha, Sahayagnya praja srishtva, Purovacha prajapatihi, Anena prasavishyadhvam, Eshavostvishta kama dukha. So this is the, we will see it more again, but Pura, which is in the beginning itself, we see that the Creator created everyone with this Yajna spirit. So all the prajas were created, and then they were told that, may you prosper. Oh, my dear children, follow this and may you prosper. Eshava ishta kama dukkha. So may you prosper, but you will have this thing called the kama dukkha, or wish-fulfilling cow. And we'll see what and how this wish-fulfilling cow helps us in being prosperous in this world. So we'll take that up for next time. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.